You guys are consuming services? All right, quite a few. It's a little bit of the buzz going on, right? It's been a buzz for a while for quite a while with web services and so forth. We're certainly talking a lot about it here. Turns out all the services are not created equal, and that's what we want to talk about today. I'm Steve Lasker. I'm a program manager in Visual Studio for Microsoft. I work on our cloud platform tooling team. I've been doing this for too many years, going through all the different services and data scenarios, and after those years, we've come up with a new approach, so we'll talk about that quite a bit today. And with that, I've been working with Dave at Salesforce.
Dave Carroll. I run our developer evangelism team at Salesforce. Been at Salesforce for a little over 12 years. I'm here because I'm excited about working with Microsoft. Before Salesforce, I was a Microsoft consultant. I wrote a Outlook add-in for Salesforce before I started working for Salesforce. So I'm just super excited to be working with Microsoft on this. So that's me.
So today, what we wanted to talk about. So we're going to talk about the modern services, the focus more on services, and we'll talk a little bit about those details, such as what are they. We're going to spend most of our time in demos. I hope that's okay. We will then bump back out and just give you some resources at the end. So if you see us speeding to the end and hitting the brakes at the end, that's why we wanted to spend most of our time in demos. But to provide some context on this, what exactly is a connected service? So when we think about these, they are the same services that you're likely already consuming. There's technical services such as storage and caching, whether it be databases or otherwise, or file storages. Or they're business level services like human and resource and content management, and it's one of the reasons that Salesforce is here. They happen to have a really good platform for this. The problem is these are evolving at a fairly rapid pace. And while we tooled in Visual Studio years ago for SOAP and then WCF and WCF Star, and we want the whole world to do it this way, and then we can provide great tooling, the world's kind of evolving pretty quickly. And protocols are evolving. And if we can only support the thing that we shipped a while ago, that doesn't give platforms like Salesforce to evolve in a robust, unique way.
Well, the other thing is, if you notice all those names on the right, that's a pretty broad, diverse group of companies, all with very creative people, very smart people, but they all do things slightly different, right? And so that becomes a problem as you're trying to leverage these services in your application.
Yeah. I mean, even just as a little practical thing, last night a bunch of us went out to dinner and drinking a little bit, maybe not enough, but there's a photo booth there. We're like, photo booth, it's awesome. They should have like a Facebook and Twitter thing so I don't get this printed out thing. And turns out they do. So we go off to this photo booth and the photo booth, and there's four of us cram in this little thing, and we take a picture, and Paul wouldn't give me the picture, actually, to share. So anyway, and we see a Twitter thing in there. So I'm like, let me log in with my Twitter account. And Dave's yelling at me, don't log in, you're going to get hacked. Yeah. And I'm thinking it's going to bump my Twitter followers, so I'm happy. So it doesn't really bother me. But I'm logging in, and there is a login dialog that comes up. That is Twitter. It's an OAuth dialog that comes up, and I'm typing into the Twitter site, and then it fails because it doesn't actually have the client ID and secret for that client to be permissive to submit to Twitter. So it did fail, but it failed because even these things that say Twitter on it can't keep up with the modern services. So it's a little goofy. I just thought it was kind of funny last night. It would have been better if I had the picture, and I'll see if I can snag it from Paul. So anyway, the point is these are a multi-step process to connect to these services. So how many of you guys have connected to OAuth services, the modern, right? How much fun was that? Yeah.
How many did it 2 years ago? Right. So you didn't have quite as many libraries as you do today. And that was really OAuth, not OAuth 2.0, right? So we're already to 2.0 of OAuth in 2 years.
So it feels really good, and you want to have that sense of accomplishment, but it is not easy to do. First of all, Well, first of all, what is the service that I'm connecting to, and I have to go back and provision that service. It's not like the old, SOAP days where somebody would tell me what the username and password is, maybe give me a cert that I could connect. Each app has to go and be configured and registered with that service to be consumed. You get this consumer key and secret. Well, you still need the endpoint. Where is the service that I have to connect to? You go into your OneNote or email or Post-it notes to find the URLs to connect to. What proxies do I need to consume that service? And we'll talk a little bit about these monstrous ad service reference proxies that we used to generate. And we now think about NuGet, but there's still customizations. And that's why, again, Salesforce is a great example there. And then after I've consumed all that, now what? Am I left to the World Wide Web to go figure out how to use the thing I just added to my project? Right? There's just a lot of mystery. And we can feel great when we figured it out, but if you're tasked with trying to consume 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 services in this one app, which is not impractical, how do you become an expert in each one very quickly? And how deep do you need to know each one? So we have a customer that we both work with from a Salesforce and Microsoft perspective, a company called Landesk. They do a systems management for devices and call centers and other cool stuff. They are using both Salesforce and Visual Studio and TFS. So what they've done is they've got their bugs in TFS. Right? Anybody keep their bugs in TFS? Right? Kind of cool. How do you prioritize the bugs in TFS? You got your triage team and come up with some Pry1 and Sev1 rules and so on and so forth. And that's really cool. And we can look at this big long list of bugs and argue around what's important to you and what's important to me and why I should fix it.
Which is the biggest customer? Yeah. Who's paying the most money? How many people does it affect?
I understand why I brought the Salesforce guy here. He's the customer guy. It turns out Salesforce is used at Landesk. They have a clicker that works. They have all of their customer data in there, like who is the biggest customer, who's spending the most money, who maybe isn't spending the most money yet, but they got a really big deal coming. So doesn't that help prioritize the bugs? Or a particular bug it's a small, nuanced bug, but it affects like 50 customers. Let's just fix that one thing and make them happy. So how do we do that? So Tanner from Landesk, they've kind of came up with the growth population formula. How do you separate the low priority bugs from the high priority bugs and actually kind of get a balance to all of them so you can find the mean of where things are? So they came up with the growth population formula and figured, let's prioritize our customer information in Salesforce with the information we've got in TFS, including the dates and how long they've been open and all of these details. And now we can use that data and get a nice view so we can see that curve of bugs. So this is a list of bugs. And I graded up because this is actually some real data there. And then the cases, which is how Salesforce manages, give a quick.
Well, a customer might run into a bug, and what they'll do is they'll file a case, a customer support case. So that's what that is.
So we track the TFS bugs with cases to customers, and now we have the linkage between the two. So now we can do some pretty rich data mashup. So the idea is now, with the bugs there, they're all dancing in the street and having fun with their bugs as opposed to arguing with their bugs. So. I'll leave the MC Hammer video. That's a whole other twist. So with that, that's our setup. We're going to jump in and do some demos. All right, we have, why don't we switch over to, talk about that first. So we have our Landesk UI. So typical mock-up, right? It's got all the visualizations. This is actually out on my GitHub repo, so you can download all the code we'll show today. We'll talk about Tanner's, thanking him later. But there's nothing behind this yet. There's just some basic. We don't really have the services, so we need to fix this. So Dave, the first thing we want to do is consume Salesforce. So why don't we go through that?
Let's do that. But before we start, Salesforce, a little bit about Salesforce, because a lot of people don't know much about Salesforce. And we're a CRM, we're service and support, we have a marketing cloud, but we also have quite a customizable platform for these SaaS applications and the ability to build other applications. So that's enough about that. But what we've done from day one is had a lot of APIs. We started out with an XML RPC API. Then we moved to SOAP. And now we've included REST. And we've probably got, the REST endpoints are actually limitless because you can add data objects to Salesforce, and each one automatically becomes a REST endpoint that you can access. But we have metadata APIs, streaming APIs, we have tooling APIs, batch APIs, a lot of APIs, right? And so Microsoft said, who's got a lot of APIs? Salesforce does. And so I just want to publicly say thank you for including us in the early stages of this, because I think this is going to be fantastic. Now,
and the challenge, I mean, what Dave's kind of talking about is we had this challenge of how do we consume services, and when we thought about how do we do it in a more modern way, that's kind of how we got to the Salesforce conversation. Is they're a pretty significant player out there. If we can get it working for them, it should work for us and others.
Well, the fact of the matter is Salesforce does 75 billion transactions a month on our site, and about 55% of those are through the API, right? So it's very robust, highly optimized, and leveraged.
So we want to add Salesforce here.
So let's add Salesforce. Now, I've been able to write .NET applications consuming Salesforce APIs for a long time, probably since Salesforce was around. And the way that you do that traditionally is with a SOAP endpoint. So you can download your WSDL from Salesforce.
Well, why are you downloading the WSDL?
Why are you downloading the WSDL?
Can you just type it in?
Well, you have to obtain the WSDL, right? What Steve's referring to, and we're not going to walk through this. We did this at Build, but we decided
save a little time.
Just to tell you
how
about
many of you guys
it.
have used Add Service Reference?
Or Add Web Reference.
Add
right?
Web Reference, even a little bit older, right?
So you can't use Add Service Reference because the Salesforce SOAP endpoint really isn't compatible with Add Services. So you have to use Add Web Reference. And then you're asked to type in the URL of the WSDL that you want to have your client generated from. The problem is that's behind a login inside of Salesforce.com.
Which is an OAuth login, so which we don't support.
There's no facility within Visual Studio to present an OAuth login page.
And we had the same problem with SAP. You log in there, and it asks you again. It asks you again.
It's not a big deal, right?
Yeah,
so as I mentioned,
anyway.
you can download the WSDL, save it to your hard drive, put in the path to the file in the add web reference, and then click Go. And so that's great, and there's actually a lot of .NET implementations that are still using that today. The problem is that it's not very efficient in a couple of different ways. So if you were to look at the reference.cs file created by that process, it's 118,000 lines of code.
Who gets paid for lines of code?
Yeah.
It's a great way to beef up your bill.
Yeah, if you're getting paid for lines of code, it's not a bad way to go. 118,000 lines of code that you can't touch, right, because it's generated code, meaning that if you modify it and have to go back and refresh that, something changed on the service side, then any changes you made will get stepped on.
So this is like where Salesforce having custom objects. How many of you guys use databases, right? You probably add some. Who gets the database right the first time? All right, I got a group of honest people. You guys have been drinking. So there's the whole idea is you're going back and adding things. So I generated this client proxy. It's got all my tables and fields, and Salesforce objects are pretty much the same thing with business logic in it. You go back and add one. If you go back in and regenerate that, any code that you've written in there, gone. Now, we told you, don't touch this, but that wasn't really helpful. It was just an acknowledgement of the problem. So.
Yeah, so that's an issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually feel like your code at that point. You're not in control. The other issue, and this is kind of a minor thing because you can fix it, but I think because SOAP is so difficult to deal with, for some reason Visual Studio prevents step debugging through that particular
assistant.
file.
It's not really your code, so we try to hide it from you because we don't want you to have to
you
step through it.
can change that.
It's a feature.
Take an attribute off or whatever. But anyways, what I want to do with LandDesk is I want to bring in cases and contacts. I don't want to bring in opportunities. I don't want to bring in all the custom objects. I don't want to bring in leads. I don't care about that. Why should it be in my application, right? So there's another way. So that's the old SOAP way. The other way to do this is maybe to right-click on references, right? This is the more modern way. So that was add service reference. And we've got manage NuGet packages. And so this seems like probably something that most people would gravitate towards initially. Just type in Salesforce and see what kind of libraries other people in the community have created. And so we see we actually get quite a few of them, but the problem is it's almost an embarrassment of riches. I don't know which one of these is appropriate for the type of project I'm in.
There's no project
or
filter.
If there's a difference.
Yeah.
I don't know who wrote this, if it's going to be supported, if it even works properly, all that kind of stuff. So you could do it this way. You can certainly just
It turns out there are some NuGets in there that are very helpful, but
as a matter of fact, we
the
use
NuGet.
one of the NuGets in here underneath the connected service. But you could always just create an HTTP request, do it yourself, but then you got to work out the OAuth, right? You got to figure out how to get the page up there, what to do with the tokens, understand Salesforce's particular eccentricities. What is it? Eccentricities?
I'm not going to try that one. I'm happy with...
Too many syllables. Anyways, this is fraught with peril. There's an easier way. All right, so let's check out the easy way, and I'm going to demo this for you right now. So I'm going to move this paper because it's messing with my mouse. Right, so I'm going to right-click on references, and in between these two ways that we've decided not to use is add connected services. How many
It's
of
the
you
meat in the sandwich. We're just...
the meat in the sandwich. How many of you is the first time you've seen the connected services in Visual Studio? Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Great.
Perfect.
So what you see on the left-hand side are service providers. Sorry,
They're not providers. They're connected services.
People that
We have this
companies that are providing services. Yeah, there's some debate as to what officially to call it. So we got Microsoft. We've got PDF from DataLogix here, and then Salesforce. And so the Microsoft, Azure Mobile, there's a lot of good stuff. What you'll notice is these little clouds on the right. These tell you whether or not that particular service is appropriate for your project type. So you know right off the bat, well, I can't use mobile services. I'm in a web project.
Right, it's a client library.
So that's not going to work. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Salesforce and then begin the configuration process. Now, a lot of you guys said you're interested in building connected services. As soon as I hit configure, what the code that's running now is Salesforce's connected service code. This is the V6 that we wrote. So up until then, this was part of the connected services framework. And from here on out, it's all under control of Salesforce to define and create this experience for the developer.
So instead of it being a text box, which is what add service reference is, and as long as you implement one of the few technologies that we know of, we can make it work, we basically said we can't keep up with everybody. We can't keep up with Salesforce. We can't keep up with DataLogix or other ones that are out there. We're going to invert the model and let them configure how they want their service to ask you the right questions to configure the service and configure the project. So what you're seeing here is the Salesforce customization. We'll show some others in a minute.
The company that created this service is really the one best able to give you the right experience, collect the right data. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to be asked for two kind of authentication methods. And the first one, I'm logging into my Salesforce account. So this is the design time authentication, which might be different from the type of authentication that I want at runtime.
Kind of like your SA account, which you're hopefully not putting in the project at runtime, but
Right,
using
so-
to configure the database.
So I'm going to go ahead and
All right, who uses
these.
SA at runtime? Who's going to admit to it? You guys have been honest so far.
What's SA?
The system account for SQL Server.
Oh, we don't have
Not that honest, are you? Okay.
Anyways, I remember that from a long time ago.
Yes.
So I'm going to use this login. This is just a standard Salesforce login. You'll notice down below that I've got this domain name. So within Salesforce, I can create a unique domain name for my company so that I can then brand or customize the login experience. And so that's what we're going to do here. So when I click Next, then I'm asked, what do I want to do for the runtime authentication? And in this version, we have two authentication options. One's web server flow, and the other is username password flow. And again, they're both OAuth 2 flows. There's 2 or 3 other types of OAuth flows. including JSON token thing. We have the ability of doing single sign-on, some
There's a digital certificate
digital
one.
certificates, and we're going to add those as we go forward. But in this case, we're just going to use the web server flow.
And the point is that these are customizations that you can make based on this service and how you want to consume it.
Well, what happens is it's configured differently based on your choices here. And so username and password would be for like a headless integration, something that's a command line, very common use case. So let's continue on. And then, again, this is something that you would not see in another service provider or connected service because this is very unique to Salesforce. Although other services might have this functionality, we decided to stick it in here. So I'm going to use my custom branded sign-on page. And then finally, I'm presented with a list of the objects. At Salesforce, we call the tables in the database objects. And so this is the list of all the tables available to me in my database. And so for the LAN desk demo, I want cases and contacts. And so I'll just choose those, case and then contact.
So I don't get 118,000 lines. I'm going to get these two models, and that's it. That's pretty cool.
Right. So I'm being very narrow in what I want in there. Now, what's happening right now is Visual Studio is essentially an API client to the Salesforce APIs, the metadata APIs. And so it's going in and using the metadata API to create what's called a connected app. And the connected app is what provides you with your consumer key, your secret, the callback URL, all the OAuth configuration bits. Now, once that's done, which it is now, you're presented with this web page. So one of the things Steve mentions, like, one of the steps is, okay, I got all this stuff added. What do I do now? How do I use this? And so this is what we've given you here, is how to use it. So we tell you exactly what we did to your project.
We really want to take the mystery out. We didn't want you to run this and go, so I need to use source control just to figure out what you did. Which, of course, you can, but we want to build that trust factor in.
Two main philosophies that Microsoft has used in Connected Services SDK. One is transparency, as you mentioned, but the other is, it's your code. We only want to give you everything that you need to use it. We don't want to stick a bunch of sample code in there that you peel out. Might be useful for the first time, but anytime after that, you're just deleting stuff, right? So kind of a hands-off approach. So here's the things that happened in there. We created some app settings. By the way, the thing that we created inside of Salesforce is shown right here so that you understand and have a reference to that. And then we added some NuGet packages, some references, of course. And then in the web config, what we've done is we've stuck all the OAuth configuration in there for you. So if for some reason you need to change it, maybe you're going from one of our sandboxes into a production system, you'll have to change those values. Very easy to do. They're just in web config. So the other thing that we give you on this page is a getting started. And so these are two walkthroughs that correspond to the two OAuth flows. One OAuth flow, again, was web server or MVC, and the other one is username and password. And then you can simply walk through this cutting and pasting. It takes like 5 minutes to get through this thing. So I'm going to switch back over to the project now and talk a little bit more about what was added to the project.
Well, yeah, okay. We got that. You want to just add? Why don't we just jump to adding the code for the controller?
Well, I just want to point out these two parts here. So there's the Salesforce service. So this is the service reference that was created and added. And more importantly is the Salesforce OAuth redirect handler. And this little class is magic, right? So once everything's set up, using this class, this is what handles requesting a token, parsing the token afterwards, storing the token off somewhere where you can use it on subsequent calls and everything else. So I love that little class.
Yeah, that's cool. We actually, so for the ones that have done this, you've probably been through the pain of what exactly is that OAuth code that I would write, and how do I maintain and the refresh tokens and so forth. And we've been working with the Azure AD team to come up with a pattern that we feel really comfortable with that is scalable and handles these scenarios. So if you know Vittorio, I won't do that. Anyway, okay, so we work with it closely to figure out what is the right pattern to bring into your project. And you see it's under service references, just like you're probably used to seeing. And we've scaffolded it into your project, so if you do need to enhance it, for instance, I've got a sample that we've been working on to store the token instead of in memory on the server. I could put it in Azure Storage, so I can run across a web farm, or I can share it across a web API request as well. So because we scaffolded it, it's your code, and you can enhance it as you want. So I'll let you pick up with the...
Yeah. So going back to the walkthrough, basically I'm asked to create a controller, paste this code into it, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Right-click on the controller and add a new one. Just a simple blank controller because I'm going to be getting rid of the code, and I'm going to call it a contacts controller.
So it's just the MVC pattern that we're doing here because we're going to do some MVC views.
Get rid of this guy. Paste this guy in. Now, there's some red ticks over here, and I'll explain that in a minute. But what's in this controller really is it's a simple CRUD controller. So there's a method for creating, for updating, deleting, and querying the data. Each of these will be bound to a separate view if you follow the walkthrough all the way through. Let's talk about the red stuff for a second. So, when we scaffold stuff, we have a lot more context about the project, including the namespace. When we cut and paste, we don't have that context. And so really, all I need to do is fix up these namespaces. So I'm going to go ahead and do my magic little script.
You're a really fast typer.
I know, isn't that cool? Right, so now I've got a nice, clean controller.
It's like showing off Salesforce productivity. That's just not fair.
No, this is Visual Studio, man. Anyways, so we already have the navigation menu item up there.
Yeah, we did the UI pieces
saw that.
already.
So the next step would be to create a list view. And so I'm going to go ahead and...
That's when we drag in.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and create this list view down here. And I do that by using the context awareness of Visual Studio, clicking within the method that I want to add the view, and then, could not find a matching view. Add view, not go to view. Here we go. So it's going to be index. This is going to be a list, and it's going to be the contact model class.
So you guys familiar with MVC? Yes? Okay, so what we're seeing here is we're just trying to plug in the Salesforce stuff into the MVC pattern. We don't want to make Salesforce be a pattern that we know of, and we want to provide that bridge, and not make everybody the same. So we want to provide that uniqueness. So we take an MVC, we put their code in there, and because we scaffolded the contact class, because that's what we asked for, we can use that to generate the view.
So the view is generated, and this is actually quite a long view. Basically, it's creating a field for every single field on that object. Probably not really the thing that we want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop typing and following the instructions and actually just pull in my views. I'm going to grab all of these views and then drag them over to my view folder. I want it in contacts, so I'll drop it there. It's replacing that one. And so now my index view is a bit shorter, right?
That's a little bit more digestible.
Got a half a dozen fields on it. So at this point, I think we're ready to go, right?
We should be good to go. Let's take a look at whether it works.
Should I do it in Chrome?
Yes, sure.
So anyways, one of the things that I believe firmly as a developer evangelist at Salesforce.com is that I want to be able to get you who are not Salesforce.com platform experts up and running and to be able to do your job without learning our entire platform. And so how many of you guys think you could now connect to Salesforce and do an integration? How many of you guys are Salesforce experts? Exactly. We succeeded, right? I mean, you might in the course of working with Salesforce find some stuff that you like, but, that'll come.
Well, it's the pattern of what we're trying to do with connected services, progressive learning. We didn't want you to be an expert in Salesforce just to get started, or Azure Storage, or Data Logics, or, Visual Studio Online, which is one we'll show here in a second. We really wanted to come up with a model that lets you get started quickly, and you can come back and fill in the gaps on the details.
So what I've done is I clicked on that link up top, and automatically I'm presented with the OAuth flow. So I'll go ahead and log in using this OAuth flow. And this is a very common pattern, right? This is asking you, here's what this application wants to do to your data. Are you going to allow it?
This is what the photo booth was trying to do, but it couldn't display it. It was kind of confused.
And then we'll click Allow, and then we get back to our list of contacts, which is really cool, right? I mean, that's pretty easy. And it's way easier than SOAP. It's way easier than Googling around trying to figure out how to use somebody's NuGet package. This is the promise of the connected services, right? If it can be this easy to get to Salesforce, it's got to be this easy to get to other services. Yeah. So let's just take a look a little bit more deeply at the kinds of things that happen when you can do this. I don't want create. I'm going to go edit Pat Stewmiller. And one of the things I'm going to edit here is I'm going to take her name and I'm going to make it ridiculously long. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab out of that. Now, I immediately see an error. This is a field level validation that reflects some of the business roles that are put on the database on the Salesforce side in the back end. I can't have anything longer than 40 characters in this field. Likewise, if I go and I change this email to something that's not an email, and again, we're not making a server round trip. I'm just getting out of that, taking the focus to a different place. I get another field level validation that that's not a valid email address. So, Steve, why is that happening?
This is, if you've used MVC, you know that they have the data annotation attributes that they can pick up on. So what we've done is when we scaffolded the objects for Salesforce, that we went and read the metadata. Now, although the service is a REST service, which has no default metadata, and we have the same challenges with Web API, Salesforce has a metadata service, and it's not a standard. But because we've got this custom connected service for Salesforce, they can call it wherever they want. It's an API client. So inside of it, it goes out, and it happens to use a SOAP service to get the metadata for the REST service.
No, it doesn't. It actually uses a REST call. I looked at the code today.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, they have them in both. And the point is it doesn't matter because we can bundle them together. We get the benefits at REST at runtime, and we get the metadata as a unique platform.
Yeah, so
we have the same challenge with Dynamics CRM and SAP. They all implemented their metadata in different places.
Yeah, so what you're saying in this case is the ID in Salesforce is immutable, so that it's the key. It's the primary key for this object. Display name is actually the label within Salesforce. And then creatable or updatable, because it's immutable, then both of those are false. And you can also see that down, where's the email field? So down in the email field, in Salesforce, we have kind of metadata types for the fields. You might create a URL field or an email field, and that information can be obtained with a simple API call, and then we can attribute these properties and thereby take advantage of MVC in that case. All right, so where's a custom field? So we have a custom field down here. So this is a field that was created by a user.
Wait, you're giving away too much. You're jumping ahead. I don't want to show them that yet.
No, it's cool. Okay, so what's next? What's the next thing we need to do? So we got the Salesforce
erase
connection.
That. You got to go back. You didn't see that part. So what we want to do now is we want to add other services.
There's a question in the back.
Yeah, shoot.
We'll get to the question.
See, again, you're jumping ahead.
Hold on.
No.
The question was.
Don't give him the question.
We're recording this, right?
Yes, but
the
I don't want to know that.
The question was, is there any single sign-on? The answer is, stay tuned. Yes.
All right, so I now want to add another service. So in this case, I want to add Visual Studio Online because that's where our bugs are. Now, it turns out the Visual Studio Online is working on revamping their APIs to be more REST-friendly. And they don't have a connected service yet, but I've been working with a team, and I went and built a sample. Now, we're not going to ship it in the box, but that's the whole point. If you use NuGets, we don't ship those in the box. They're out on NuGet.org, and we integrate with that. We've done the same thing here by integrating with the Visual Studio Gallery, which is where you get Visual Studio extensions. So here we've got the Salesforce one, we've got a DataLogix, the PDF service, and we have this Visual Studio Online one that I've done as a sample. So I've already installed them. That's what all the little checkboxes are for. And now when I go, we'll see that we have the Visual Studio Online one. We'll double click and we'll add it. Now again, this happens to be a wizard again, but we have other ones like App Insights that use a single page layout. Azure Storage has a grid layout, and they're all tailored to that experience. So now I can use the nice little handy-dandy TFS selector and grab my project from TFS, and I don't know what that was about. That wasn't healthy. Let's try that again. Yeah, I'm logged in the right person. Okay. So I've now got my project. Now here, similar to Salesforce, we have a runtime authentication, but this is unique to Visual Studio Online. In fact, although I put the other two, they actually don't work yet, so we're still early on in this, and this is just a sample. Here, I don't have custom objects in TFS, at least that's not the way I implemented it yet, but I did want to provide a name in case I needed to connect to a couple of TFS projects. So we'll add that. It'll add the NuGet libraries, in this case just for JSON. It'll launch a what happened and getting started. And the next step would be to add a controller. So I'm going to go grab that code. We'll come back over here and we're going to add a controller for work items. I'll replace this code. We'll fix up the namespace. Yeah, I'm just as fast. I can.
You're learning Padawan.
So what you're seeing here is we did the same thing. We've added another node in the service references. We've added the getting started because everybody just closes it right away because get it out of my way. We want to give you a chance to get back to it. In fact, let's just close all these here. And we've scaffolded in some code that, again, is yours to use. Now, we've got that running. Oh, I didn't add the view. Let's come back and add that view. So I'll add a view to see our work items. Again, we're just doing the MVC pattern, and it's the work item. And we see a bunch of properties. I'll run it again this time. So what we want to do is we're incrementally building up this app. We're adding the Salesforce service. We're adding Visual Studio Online. And did it launch? Let's try that again. It says build succeed. Hold on. We'll do it this way. All right. So the model here, again, is it doesn't matter if it's Salesforce or Visual Studio Online or Dynamics CRM or SAP. You can consume different services and have them configured in your project that easily. It's in the project, but we're seeing if something's, why is it? It says build succeed.
Reboot.
No. Actually, I think it's Chrome.
Sure, blame Chrome.
Actually, it is. Chrome's not coming up.
Run it in IE.
I was about to. I actually don't even have the shortcut. I have to go to the back.
Just do it from Visual Studio. There's a drop down there.
All right, it's localhost. Is it this one? Okay, so here's our app. We showed the Salesforce. Now we'll bring up the VS Online work items. And so now I've got those bugs that are coming out. So I've got Salesforce context. I've got Visual Studio Online bugs. Let's put them together. All right, so let's stop this here. So this is where the fun code that Tanner has put together comes together. So we have a controller, which he calls a UMP controller, an OOMP controller, which kind of makes me think of Deadliest Catch, where Captain Keith is always going oomp, 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 oomp. I guess I've been watching too much late night TV. So we'll go add that to, where's our controllers folder? Models A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, there we go. So we got our OOMP controller, and what he's returning, actually he's got this calculator, because the controller is pretty straightforward, right? Controllers don't do a lot, they call into other functionality. So we'll go grab this guy, and this is where that whole calculation gets done. We'll pop it in here. And what we see is he's returning an OOMP result, score result. So let's go grab that. And this one is nothing but a POCO model that is the return type that we want to return. Okay, very straightforward and simple. But in here is where he's querying Salesforce and VS Online and puts them together. Now, what I'm going to do is do a quick build here, and we're going to find a couple of errors. The first one is work item does not have a cases object on it. Now, where does work item come from? TFS, right? And cases comes from Salesforce. So these things don't know about it. I got to put them together here. Now, what you're going to see if I go to the work item type, down here. I am just not getting my ABCs together today. So work item, because this is scaffolded code, I can go change this. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to add cases to my work item type, and that's my code. Nobody's going to go stepping over this. There's no green text that says don't do that. All right? There's a different pattern that we're doing here. Let's go build again. Oh, I hit breakpoints. Wrong sequence. All right, case does not VS Online ID. I'm pretty darn sure that Cases has a VS Online ID on there.
VS Online ID should be a custom field that was created on the Salesforce side to provide this relationship between the two.
So it's there, but you noticed it had __C on it. So Dave, can you explain why it's got that?
As I was saying before, __C is the Salesforce idiom for determining what is custom and what is Salesforce standard. So Salesforce has a bunch of standard objects that represent accounts, contacts, and so on, standard fields. And we want to be able to create those standard objects and fields as we see fit. And so
not step on mine.
And not step on yours.
Yeah.
And so anytime a customer creates one, we put __C to differentiate it.
I don't want that in my project. Anybody want that in their project? Right. So again, because it's scaffolded, I can just edit the code directly. So you're starting to see some of this kind of play off here. Now the last one is Cases is missing account. Dude, you were supposed to add account. I gotta
no
start
problem.
over. How much time we got here?
I can add account. Do you want me to take care of the __C?
Yeah,
too?
I don't want to see the __C. I know why you guys got to do it up there in Salesforce.
Okay.
We don't like that in .NET. So.
All right. So there's connected services is layers. So there's the framework, the SDK that's provided by Microsoft. There's the service that we created. Within our service, we also have base our scaffolding on T4 templates. What that means is that you can customize the T4 templates within our service to meet whatever coding standards you might have, compliance with your internal systems. And so I'm going to show you how that plays out. Now, where's our getting started page? Did we lose that?
We probably closed it, but how do you get it?
Well, I don't know.
You don't really? Go back to Visual Studio.
Oh, wait, wrong one. Sorry. Okay, back to Visual Studio. You're going to force me to do this, aren't
I
you?
am.
All right. Getting started.
There we go.
Do I double click it?
We're going to do a usability test here.
But see, it wants to open it.
Oh,
in
so I'm
Chrome.
trying to open it in Chrome. That is kind of broken. See?
Okay, so let's.
Try killing Chrome in Task Manager. All right, well, anyway.
Okay,
Demo proceeds.
let's see. Chrome's not in the task manager. Okay.
Just.
All right, so in the getting started, you must have this shortcut somewhere, right?
Yeah, let me try something really quick. Yeah, in this case, it's truly the default browser of the machine, so that won't do it. We are going to realize that there is no group selection here. This is kind of cool. I get to just shoot Chrome in the head a couple times. How cool is that? It's like I've actually started using Chrome and liking it, so this is kind of unfortunate. Let's see if it worked. All right, there we go.
All right. Okay, so.
I grabbed the
is this
wrong one.
wrong
Double-click the Salesforce one.
Hold on, I'm not even going to close that. There we
There
go.
we go.
Okay, so we also have this customizing link on the left, and this walks you through how to find the installed T4 templates and where to put your customized T4 templates. I'm not going to go through that. You could follow that. These links all work. And so going back to 2013, what we're seeing here is the T4 template. How many of you guys are familiar with T4? Most people, about half. Okay. Basically, T4 template is a C# file, essentially. Ish. And it basically runs logic, and then there's breaks in it that say, okay, just output what's in between these symbols. And you can see that here, where I've actually hidden the C# in between these symbols. And so this is what will actually get generated. And then in between there is some logic, right? So if this, output this thing, otherwise output this thing. And so in this case, what we're doing is we're getting ready to actually define that property here. And so I'm going to just go ahead and drop some code in here. And this code is saying, before you go ahead and output that property, check to see if there's __C. If there is, create the JSON property to handle the mapping, and then also remove the __C from the property name.
Yep, pretty cool.
Right? So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to save this. And then going back to Visual Studio 2015, what I want to do to update my reference is right-click and pick Update Salesforce Data Services. So when I do that, I'm given kind of the same wizard. There's not really much I can change here because we've already been through this. But when I get to the object selection, you'll see a couple of things. One is I've got two of the objects that I've already selected, like grayed out for you. And then I can go ahead and add a count to it. Now, the way this works is pretty clever. So we're not just storing or saving or remembering that you selected something. We're actually looking at your project and seeing if those particular objects are represented in the models already. And so that means, like, if you went in and you just deleted cases, if we were storing it, then we'd have to update that location to indicate that we'd have to be aware of more stuff than we care about. So if you deleted it, then cases would show up here because it's no longer in your models.
So one of the core concepts of connected services should be your code. We want to model over your code. So that's what we've done here, is we've used features like Roslyn to go look at the project and find what's in there that matches, and that's how we determine it.
Okay, so we didn't create a new connected app. All we did was create the model. So let's go ahead.
Look what I don't see anymore.
Huh?
Look what I don't see anymore.
Well, I'm looking for, what is it called, VS Online ID?
Well, it's not in this one.
Oh, it's not in this one. So let's go down to one of these guys. So upsell opportunity is actually a custom field. And because of the modifications I made to the template, now it just shows kind of as you would expect, right, without the __C. When the data gets pushed back up to Salesforce, because of the JSON property, it will stick it in the proper JSON graph.
Pretty cool. All right, so now we've got a count back in. If we look at our error, it's basically saying the case object is missing that. So let's go add case to our project here. And we'll just go, sorry. What was it? Oh, 3, sorry. So now I've got our account property, and if we build, I put it on the wrong one. Case, why is it, account is not different? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's what happens when we don't completely fix the test the demo. Okay, that's good. All right, so we'll run this again. And now we've pulled out those attributes, and now what we're seeing, sorry, there's one more piece I want to fix. Let me go add one more file. I want to show this visually as well, so I'm going to drop that in for an API controller. And let me just close those. Okay. So now we've got our Salesforce individually, we've got our TFS items individually. We can now run through and we're going to see them grouped together using that calculator. And now I see all of my bugs. On the right, I start seeing this score come in. And you can see the numbers coming up. So who are the analytical minds that just look at text, and you're the command line people? You're a command line person. So
Yes, I am.
You can kind of, he says with pride, and I'm a visual person.
I love visualizations.
Okay, that's good. So what we're going to do is we want a little more detail. So what we've done, or what Landesk has done to be fair, is they've created a Kendo UI chart with this as well. And on the client, they're using Kendo UI. They're making a web API call. We're using that same logic to go implement that, and now I can get some rich visualizations. Now, that's kind of cool. So now I can start to rate my bugs appropriately. I can look at my bugs, and we have links here to go right into it. In fact, I was talking to the VS Online team, and they are actually working on customizations inside of Visual Studio Online as well. And in fact, what we're starting to see is there's a little bit of an OAuth flow problem here, because after I logged in, it lost the context of the bug that I was looking at. Now that I'm logged in, it'll actually track that. And if I expand that, I can see which cases were affected and launch into the Salesforce accounts, and now I can, cases rather, and I can see that specific case, okay? So I've grouped it together. I've created deep links into each one. I can look at those. I can understand more, log my and rate my bugs appropriately. Now, that's kind of cool. So far, we're pretty cool there, but we're not too thrilled with that. There's still more. What's the thing that was kind of annoying through that whole sequence? What? The logins, right. I had to keep on logging in, and maybe the browser helps me at some times, but maybe not. So the other thing you might have noticed is this part of the site, not secured at all. Now, you could say by the time I got to the data, it's secured, that's good, but we actually want to secure the site. Now, if we're going to secure the site, how do we secure it? Well, we can use SQL, the individual accounts, and just put yet another SQL database out there of all the users. Or, because Landesk actually has Active Directory, why not use that? So why not use Active Directory? Because it's flipping hard to configure. So it actually turns out to be a lot to get this working. And so one of the other services that we've done is we have Configure Active Directory on the project. And now, well, okay, so I got to do one thing here. Not app insights. So now what I can do is I can go through and I can choose the domain that I want. I can go through the steps, and yet again, another wizard, in this case, very unique configuration to Active Directory. And as I finish this, it's going to Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, creating an Azure Active Directory app. That is the thing that we configure for all the resources to say what has permissions to what. Right? It'll add the NuGet libraries for ADAL to my project. It'll take the consumer keys and secrets and put it in the project because I need to consume that. It'll go to every controller in my project using Roslyn and put the authorize attribute on each one of those controllers. So it's actually
Steve,
securing them.
That's actually one of my favorite services because it took so long. Because it took so long, it's an indication of how much it's doing for you, right? I mean, that was a lot of stuff.
It was.
Can you repeat it?
No.
Okay.
That's why I've got a wizard to do it. So that's Active Directory. So now my app is all secure. So let's go run this again. And now I forget it again. Actually,
you want to re-include that guy?
I do. That's what I want to do. But I'm seeing come over here, hide, unhide, include, and so we'll run this again. And now watch the URL. You're going to see a bunch of handshaking going on. It's asking me to log in because all of the controllers are set with the authorize attribute. So we'll log in. And same, the OAuth acceptance. So now I'm in my app. And now when I go into Salesforce, I'm still prompted. But we actually have this Azure AD button down here. And that's because Salesforce supports multiple authentication providers. And we've already configured the single sign-on between the LAN desk domain and Salesforce, but we haven't finished it. What we're going to do is I'm first going to log in here just to make sure it works. And works great. So, and then if I go, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. If I go to work items, now I've got my work items there, and if I'll just jump over to the graph because I like visuals. And if I look at my bugs, I should get right into my Visual Studio Online bug. And if I expand that and look at the cases, I'll get into cases.
Those are like 3 different logins, right? One for the app, one for Visual Studio, and one for Salesforce.
Salesforce, and all put together with single sign-on. And the only thing left is I don't want to be bugged with that single sign-on, that login for Salesforce, so I'll let Dave kind of, you can fix that, right? I don't want to see that.
You bet I can. So I'm going to fix that by modifying the connected app that was created.
Those domains.
Was it domains?
Yeah, I have to this is cool. I get to help the Salesforce guy.
My domain. Remember I told you could customize the branding on the login. Well, this happens through this My Domain. And the authentication configuration, I can simply tell it not to show a login page because we have that single sign-on. You know, some companies, want you to log in anyways, even though you're doing single sign-on. But in this case,
we don't need it.
So we have single sign-on at Salesforce, but I log into so many different Salesforce editions. I actually want the login page, and then when I go to our internal one, then I press the button. So that's how that works. So I'll go ahead and save that. And then, Steve, maybe you want to do your magic to reset all the cookies and whatnot.
So we will close that. We will do the clear all cookies from the beginning of time. So that's kind of cool. And now, if we go in, actually, hold on. So now it's giving me the Active Directory login. So I'll put that in there. I'll get redirected to that particular domain to log in. And when I log in here, you'll see the little dance going on up top, and I'm logged in here. And if I come back, I can get to my TFS bugs and so on and so forth. So think about all the things that we've just added there in this project so far. We've gone in and we used Salesforce to connect to get the Salesforce business data. We've gone to TFS and gotten the work items. We've been able to pull them all together using code, because that's the fun part. Just get the services part out of the way and let me get to coding. Because we've scaffolded the objects into the project, you can use linked queries to write projections and group those together. We've put the auth code in your project to handle the refresh tokens and redirects. And then we were able to just kind of put that together. And then we had to secure it. So again, another connected service app, connected service that I was able to configure Active Directory, and all of that was easy to configure.
So the takeaway here should be, it's not the exercising of the APIs that's difficult. I mean, it's REST nowadays. It's pretty straightforward. It's the authentication and getting that right, and then tying the authentication into other identity providers so that you can leverage the goodness of OAuth, and that's what the OAuth 2 brings to the table. And so this just makes it capable, makes it easy for us mere mortals to do stuff like this.
Okay, so we purposely built in some time to make sure that we had time to talk about how do you create a connected service. So anybody interested in creating one of those themselves? Very cool. So we've built this very intentionally to make it easy for people to use. There's a couple of concepts you get done, and we really wanted to make it focused on configuring your service and configuring the project. We just wanted to provide a framework. So we have this concept called providers. When you go and launch Add Connected Service, that list is very controlled by Visual Studio, or Visual Studio Connected Services. You basically get to give us strings and icons, and we want that UI to be very consistent. We want developers to feel comfortable there. You then decide whether you want to do a wizard, a single page or a grid to configure your service. Completely up to you. We even have a new one now where there's no UI, but that's more of an advanced scenario. You then decide for the project types you want to support. So who assumes that we were just going to support C# and VB and .NET, right? That's what Add Service Reference did. Well, we have lots of project types now. We've got Cordova with JavaScript. We've got F#. We've got Python. We've got Objective-C now. So we wanted to support any project type that Visual Studio supports. So you, as the service author, will decide which ones you want to support. We're not going to generalize the code. You decide what code you want added to which one. And then when you want to hand it off, you basically configure this instance object, hand it off between the provider and the handlers, and you can have lots of handlers associated. And then that's the handoff. And it uses MEF, if you're familiar with MEF, but kind of a detail we don't need to worry about. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like here. So you want to switch me over to number 7 there?
I can do that.
All right, cool. So what I got here is, let's see, we've got, do I have the Salesforce one here? All right, we're going to go in here. Actually, I do have the Salesforce one. Let me show you the Salesforce one. So what we did in the partnership with Salesforce is we actually built this as open source, and we just released it last week. And the reasons that we've done it was we wanted to make sure we built a very extensible connected service framework, because if it could support Salesforce, it'll support ours, it'll support yours, and that was the test. We also wanted to put a really robust reference implementation out. So we built this one in GitHub. In collaboration, and Dave and Wade and a bunch of other people at Salesforce, Wade's now back at Microsoft, were really helpful in doing that. And we've got this robust implementation, which if you look at it, it could kind of make your head hurt, because Salesforce is one of the more complex ones. So we're actually going to take some aspirin and make that go away. And I'll walk you through quickly the one we did, or that we did for Visual Studio Online. And the idea is fairly straightforward. You saw that I have got a provider, and you'll see it just implements the connected service provider. We set a couple of properties on it. We give it an icon, some URLs, and that's what populates that selection UI. We want that to be warm and fuzzy so everybody kind of feels good so far. You then decide which configurator you want, which is the grid single page or wizard, and then we go off and launch that. Now, the grid single page and wizard, that's where you get to be as creative as you want. And we'll take a look over here, the view models. So let's take a look at the service wizard. This implements the connected service wizard configurator. We've been talking about renaming it, and I add a couple of pages to it. So all you're seeing here from the connected service point of view is WPF. It's just WPF elements. We give you a big black hole. You can do something really consistent with the UI that we've done. And we take on all the theming for you. So if it switches to the dark side, we'll give you dark side theming. All of that is done for you automatically. If you use MVVM, there's a lot of hooks that kind of make things a little bit easier. Then the hard part is really what's unique to your service. So we'll come over here, and you're going to capture some questions through these wizard pages. And then in the handler is where you're going to do the stuff unique that you need. So we'll come over here and let's see, add service instance async. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some information from the project system, because I need a lot of context from the project. And you're going to learn a little bit about the Visual Studio SDK, because we're basically giving you a handle to the project and saying, go party. If you want to destroy somebody's project, that's why we have voting in the gallery. So hopefully you will be voted out of the island and you'll be done. But that's not what we see. People actually want to have a great experience. We'll add assembly references. And in this case, we're making sure configuration and data annotations are added. We're writing to that progress dialog. Again, you don't have to write that UI. We provided that for you. We add some NuGet packages. We have a recommendation to cache the NuGet packages in your v6. because you're compiling your connected service against a known set of NuGets. So you might as well cache it, because it goes a lot faster than going online and getting something you already know you need. Because we're using NuGets, you can, of course, go to your project and say, I want the newer ones of it. So, again, working within the existing patterns. And what else do we do here? We update the config files. So let's take a look. We add some config settings to your web or app config, or in ASP.NET 5, it'll be config.json. And we're following a naming convention. So there's a bunch of little details in here. And what's the last thing? We generate the scaffolding. So in this one, I didn't take the time to use T4 templates. I would definitely, that's one of the things I wanted to get to. But I pull in one of 3 templates that I've got set up in the project, and I just copy them in, and I do some token replacements.
Can you scroll back up?
Yeah. To where?
To where the highlighted, there you go, right there.
Okay.
So this is the essential pattern, really. This is the crux of it, right? To add references, to go get any packages that you need, update the configuration locally for the project,
Yep.
and then generate whatever code is necessary. I mean, it's not super complicated. Those are the steps involved.
Yeah, so we really wanted to make this easy for you. We have a lot of samples out in our GitHub repo. The last step is you basically say, I'm done. Go add this service instance result, which is that folder that gets added to service references. We'll add the getting started document, so you can double click it and open that up. We recommend that's where you put your service code. And of course, you can go out of that where models should go in the particular project type. So if I let's just hit Control F5 here, and we'll run this. And what we're going to see is Visual Studio, using the Visual Studio SDK, will start we'll start an experimental instance. So now what it's doing, it's spinning up another copy of VS, but it's working in a special hive, so it tries to isolate itself from the rest. And this is how you can debug through your connected service to make sure it's making the service calls to configure the OAuth endpoint. It's configuring your project right. So now if I open a console app, and we'll let that finish loading. Almost done. It's great with having async, but then you look and I go, I can do all this stuff, but no, I can't yet. So now I can go add my connected service, and I happen to have it already installed, but it would now show the ones that I've been working on. So that's kind of the quick run through there. I think that's all I really wanted to cover there. Any questions on that so far?
The one in the back. I don't think you can see.
Oh, no. I need the halo lens.
Yeah, the columns in between us there, sorry. So just one question about this, because it does look kind of similar when you would pull something down from NuGet. Obviously, NuGet handles versioning. You can see, like, oh, there's a new version of this. Is there any provision in here for versioning in the services? Like, they would find, like, oh, there's been a new version of this rolled out.
Yeah, so the question is really centralized around versioning of connected services and to some extent the NuGets that we reference as well. So the Visual Studio Gallery has versioning. And in fact, one of the reasons that we chose a V6 for connected services itself is although we are shipping quarterly for Visual Studio, we wanted to be able to ship updates on a more frequent basis or be more in control. As soon as you put an update to a V6 in the gallery, Visual Studio sees what V6 is, on notification, on intermittent, on recurring. It occasionally goes back and checks what you have installed, and is there something newer on the gallery, and will give you a little toast notification in the top right. So you can get an update to your connected service. The NuGets that are added, you can go to Manage NuGets, and you can see if there's new updates there. We didn't want to invent anything really new. We really wanted to fall in with the consistency of what Visual Studio is already doing and ride the backs of others, not just ride the giants of Salesforce for connecting to services that are out there, but ride the teams that are building other features into Visual Studio as well. Did I do that or did you do that?
I did that.
Okay. So authoring, so basically you do need the Connected Services SDK. It itself is a NuGet. Implement a few classes, add some WPF, right? Hopefully, if you're building one of these things, you know a little bit about Visual Studio and WPF development, and even that is fairly trivial. Data Logics, I saw hiding on the other side of that pole there. They've been doing that most recently and doing a great job. So hopefully that's fairly trivial. The hard part, what we found, is does the service itself support remote management? We went off and we were going to go do another sample on Google's APIs, and they've got great APIs, but you have to go to their portal to configure the services. We had a minor ask of Salesforce. We had a copy and paste a consumer secret in earlier.
Yeah, so that's actually key if you're thinking of developing services. One of the things you need to make sure is that your services themselves have configuration APIs sufficient to make that happen.
And then, quality of service, configure the project. There again, we're not trying to implement anything new. We debated quite heavily on what APIs we support. There's a handler helper APIs for managing the config file, for instance, copying files into the project. And we didn't want to try to recreate what the VS SDK already does. So we try to provide some value there, but basically, go use the VSO, Visual Studio SDK. And then one of the core principles you heard me kind of banter about was don't generate code. We loved MC Hammer in the old days. He's time to retire. We don't want the can't touch this style of coding. We really want it to be your code, and we could take advantage of features like Roslyn to examine your project, see what's in there, and improve it. One of the ones that Dave wants to do on, you want to talk about the property one as an example?
Which property?
Adding properties for incremental adding of properties that I add.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to do.
Okay, anyway, so I'll finish that thought. So what we want to do is if you add a property to Salesforce, a field on a table, we want to be able to add that. We showed how we can add objects, tables, but if I added a field or I changed it from a string to an int or made it an email, I want to be able to compare and bring that in. Well, I've already scaffolded out all of those properties for that class. They're properties.
Or maybe even just sync it. Right-click and sync my model. Boom.
So we can use Roslyn to see what properties are in the project and go, oh, Salesforce has this one. I'm going to bring in that other property. Or it was string and now it's an email. So we can do those kind of comparisons. So that's core of what we really want to, one of the principles that we want to drive in there. So with that, Connected Services, we're really around enabling the breadth of services. Salesforce has been a great partner to help us flush this out. It is across all services. We're working with Dynamics CRM. We've been working with Holger at SAP. Data Logics has been jumping on early, and we'd love their support of it. Guide you to configures the service in the project. Guide you to the next steps. We don't want the first step to be delete class 1. Right? That's not the first thing you should have to do. Because many times the sample code was sample code. It's not the thing you're trying to do. Ownership, completely extensible by third parties. One of the things, if you've been demoing Windows 10, you're seeing, sometimes you'll see like something loses WPF binding and it says view model for wireless network controllers are gone. Well, we are also practicing what we preach. We didn't do anything for Azure services that we didn't make available to third parties. So we wanted to really make our first parties equal to third-party experiences. And you can put your V6 on the gallery. You can install it privately. They're just V6s there. So with that, I will wrap up with a couple of links. We will take some questions afterwards. The Connected Services is the overall experience for those that want to consume services. Of course, we have the SDK if you want to author one. To get to the Salesforce Connected Service GitHub repo as a reference implementation, we've got that link there, and of course, a link for Salesforce for developers. In addition to obviously Dave and I thanking you, I do want to again thank a little kudos to Tanner and Landesk for letting us take their example and actually take the business logic you see in there is pretty much 90%. I took a little bit out just to kind of make it easy to demo. but they've been awesome to help me present this, and it's who wants to have their code handed out to be examined by others? So,
Well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to give kudos to the Microsoft team in Fargo, who did the lion's share of work on the Salesforce connected service. So,
yeah, they're an
Thanks,
awesome team. So with that, I think there's some, go off and consume more services. Our goal here is, because we've made it easy, you can consume more. I mean, ultimately, that is really what we're trying to do. There's some cool things. You've probably seen this on upgrades to Visual Studio. And of course, give us some evals. We really appreciate it. We do read it. The text notes are very helpful. The scores are great to get us to come back again.
or to keep us away.
Yeah, depending on what your motivation is. So with that, we're at time. We will take questions. And I appreciate it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.